Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Shraddha, and I'm working as an XBRL domain expert and customer success head for the European region. I'm very delighted to have you all for today's webinar, which is What's New in the ESEF XBRL Taxonomy 2021. Please note, in UK we operate with the trade name Phoenix Solution, and we are not associated with the IFRS group in the UK region. We are delighted to have you as part of today's webinar, and also I'm very glad that everybody has joined from different regions and different countries altogether. So I see participants from the UK, Belgium, India as well. Thank you everyone and welcome for today's webinar. A few housekeeping announcements before the session. If anybody has any Q&A session, if anybody has any questions, please drop their questions on the Q&A segment and we can take it ahead once the presentation is completed. All the participants are on mute, so please stay tuned. So let's begin with our webinar, which is What's New in the ESEF XBRL Taxonomy 2021. Now, everybody is aware like there is an update in the ESEF 2021 taxonomy, and there may be so many questions that everybody may have in their mind. Whether we should use the ESEF taxonomy for our 2021 reporting, whether our software should comply with the ESEF regulations, what is new in the ESEF taxonomy. So all these we'll be discussing in today's webinar. So before that, let me just give you a brief credentials on our company, what we do and from where we are. So IRIS Business Services Limited is headquartered in India and its head office is located in Mumbai. We are working in this XBRL space since 2005. We are also known as a global RegTech firm, which is in compliance with the digital reporting solutions. We have subsidiaries in Europe, USA, Singapore as well. We are members of XBRL Europe, XBRL USA for any kind of membership requirements, and also we participate actively in all these events. We work closely with the regulators across the globe, and we address different regulatory platforms such as central banks, capital markets, stock exchanges, business registry, and so on and so forth. We have done various XBRL implementation across the globe with the business registry, central banks, and capital market as well. We also do work with different partners across the globe, generally with auditors or the accounting firms, and as well as the IT companies. So we have the experience of entire XBRL and iXBRL since a decade plus now. As you can see on the right hand side, we have some quality charts which shows us our footprints where we are in the solution. So our solution, one of the solution is the Iris Carbon, which is a preparation tool for the XBRL and iXBRL submissions. So this is by an independent quality analysis, which is XBRL Logic, which they give the results every quarter, and you can see on the chart itself that we are ranking on the top. This quality score is basically on the US SEC filings. So let us go to the next slide. This is our global presence. So as you can see, we are scattered all over the world, majorly from South Asian region to the Europe, to USA, to UK, to Argentina as well. So these are the few implementation that we have done so far. In European region, we are mostly in the ESEF compliance as well as HMRC compliance as well. These are a few select clients list which we would like to share with you. So first is like the top big fours with whom we work. Also followed by there is like a Colruyt Group, which is a big retail giant in Belgium. Then we have Enel and Desa, which are like big energy companies. Nordicon, it's like Estonian company, and followed by some IT companies and big companies in other regions. Now let's discuss the major point of today's webinar is the updates to ESEF taxonomy. As I mentioned earlier, everybody will be very keen to know what are the changes that we need to understand from the ESEF perspective. But before that, we should know what exactly the taxonomy contains. It's not only the taxonomy where you need to report the line items, but also you should know what are the major changes in the standards, in the concepts, in the disclosures, and the validation rules. So the ESEF taxonomy comprises broadly of the four things together. Now, when we talk about the standard changes, it is not from related to the ESEF, but as the ESEF has adopted the IFRS taxonomy, there are major changes in the IFRS standards as well. So we need to understand what are the major changes that has happened in the IFRS standard. Then we need to understand how many concepts has been added in this particular standard relating to the standard practices. How many disclosures have been added, and are there any impact on the formula validations? So we've discussed one by one in detail. This is just a statistics on showing what are the taxonomy changes that has happened in the 2021. So as you can see, there are a few concepts that has been added, deleted, labels has been added, deleted, references also have added or deleted. So this is generally because of the changes in the IFRS standards that has happened. And that's why there are changes in each of the reporting. There are few disclosures that has been added to make the process streamlined and as per to add it to the standard practices. And there are also disclosure content changes that has also happened. So this is just a small statistic that we have prepared. Coming to the next is the main thing of understanding the changes in the IFRS taxonomy. Now, in the IFRS taxonomy, there can be two scenarios. One is amendment to the IFRS standards. What standards has been impacted or has been added or updated. And another is the common practices and general improvements. So let's stick to the first, which is amendments to IFRS standard. So the first change that has happened in the IFRS standard is relating to the IFRS 16, which is leases. Now, in the leases, due to this pandemic everywhere, there are certain rental concessions that has been offered for the lessee, wherein there are certain rental payments that has been the concept that has been added in the IFRS 16 disclosures due to the COVID pandemic. So that is the first change. Followed by, we do have an amendments to the different IFRS 9, IS 39, IFRS 7, 4, 16, which has been issued in August 2020. Now, what all these standards talk about? IFRS 9 is and IS 39 is mainly related to the financial instruments. Whether there are any disclosure changes, whether there are like measurement, changes that has happened, how the recognition of the financial instrument should be, and what it will impact. And these major updates has been there due to the interest rate benchmark that has been introduced. Then we have IFRS 4 and IFRS 16 is major relating to the leases and the and the other insurance contracts. The third change is basically on the amendments to the IFRS 17, which is like insurance contracts, and IS 16. Again, in IFRS 17, which is related to the insurance contract, it is updated to make the process streamlined as per the accounting requirements. And of course, under property, plant, equipment, there are certain concepts that had been added to make the requirements that have been there for proceeds that entity receives from selling items which are produced while testing, but it is used before its intended purpose. So these are the three major updates from the IFRS standard perspective. Followed by, we have common practices and general improvements. Now, when we talk about the general improvements or common practices, they will only impact the primary statements and few notes. So what we need to understand? Primary statements, so which all primary statements it has been impacted. So the changes majorly focuses on the financial position, cash flow changes, changes in equity, and earning per share. Also, they have in the taxonomy, they have introduced very company-specific concepts which the entities have been used so far to enable more consistent tagging. So more IFRS concepts has been added to reduce the amount of extensions while reporting. And also, due to all these changes, the modeling has been a bit changed and has been improvised so that the user of the taxonomy can use the new disclosures with the new labels to cater their requirements. The next is the employee benefit. So in the employee benefit disclosures, there are few concepts that has been added and modeling has been changed. So this is related to the post-employment benefit options that has been provided in the employment benefit category. So these were the first update which we need to know from the IFRS taxonomy perspective, and now what it will have an impact in the ESEF taxonomy itself. So let's understand. So these are the main disclosures which has a new concepts which has been added. So like I said, the major categories of disclosure which have been impacted with the new IFRS taxonomy is these four. The first is subclassification of assets, liabilities, and equity, where you have around 58 concepts that has been added. You have employment benefit because there has been some reporting changes, so the few concepts has been added due to that. Earning per share, it has been catered for per instrument recognition, so the earning per share disclosures has also been added. And the financial instrument, due to the new update in the financial instrument accounting standard, the changes has been impacted. So these are the major four disclosures that has been impacted with the new IFRS concepts. Then we also have prepared a list disclosure wise with a list of new IFRS concepts. So you can just take a look at it, in detail how many disclosures has been impacted and what are the number of concepts that has been added in each disclosure. So these are just like starting from your comprehensive income, balance sheet, analysis of income expense. Then we have all the notes to accounts which has been added as well. But from the ESEF perspective, as of now for the 2021, it is only the financial statements that we need to submit to the regulator. So the rest part of the notes is still voluntary. So our major focus should be on the financial statement changes that has been happened in the taxonomy. So these are the few things. The third category or the third change that has happened and we need to always know is the new disclosures that has been added and whether it will have any impact in the ESEF reporting. Now the third change is on the new disclosures. So what are the new disclosures that has been added? So there are like dimension, category that has been added in the ESEF taxonomy, which is the first is relating to the currency in which information is displayed. And then you have the cumulative effect at the date of initial application. Now let's understand what all disclosure contains. So in the next slide, if you see the currency in which the information should be displayed. Now what happens is that sometimes few entities do have a different currency, different from the entity's functional and their presentation currency. If that is the case, then probably that respective company should use this particular disclosure to map the requirements. Similarly, when you have a cumulative effect of change at initial application, so generally it happens when there is a new update in the taxonomy or in the update of standard, IFRS standard, how you need to report or record, your cumulative effect of changes from the initial application. So for that, there is a two dimension that has been introduced. If there is any increase, decrease due to changes in the accounting policy, and also if there is any opening balance adjustment, due to the cumulative effect. So you can use this particular set of dimensions, relationship to define the categories. So these are the two new disclosures that we need to understand. And if it is relevant, you can very well use it for your respective filings. So the fourth and the last important thing is the formula validations. Formula validation we have seen so far, whoever has done the voluntary filing, there are many errors that the user is unable to understand what exactly this ESEF taxonomy is all about, how to address the technical errors. Everybody should be aware of that. So for that, what we have listed is that the formula validation comprises of three segments. One is relating to the IFRS taxonomy guideline rules. One is relating to the ESEF taxonomy rules that has been defined by ESMA. And another is the LEI taxonomy, which is legal entity identifier, the rules that have been set and defined. All this comprising together is a part of your ESEF taxonomy. Now let's understand in detail each category as well. Now the first category or the chart that you can see it here is what the grouping has been done in such a way that the IFRS taxonomy, what are the categories of rules it has defined. So as you can see, we have listed down different categories of formula validation. The first is access aggregation, where the amount of rules are 281. What exactly this rule tells about? So this access aggregation is nothing but whenever there is a dimensional total or you want to sum up any kind of a dimensional relationship, how it gets calculated. So it gets calculated with an example. Say for example, in your stockholders equity, if you want to calculate total equity. So your total equity is a sum of your non-controlling interest plus equity equity other components, plus equity attributable to owners of parent. So these types of relationships are part of your access aggregation validations, which are already defined in the IFRS taxonomy. The next category is on the cross-period validations. Now, cross-period means whether if I want to define a calculation to calculate a closing balance. So for that, I need to define the opening balance plus changes that has happened during the period. So all these cross-period validations within the ESEF taxonomy or the IFRS taxonomy has been categorized and has been defined in this particular category. Then if you want to calculate an earning per share, so there is a different category altogether which it calculates the EPS by this particular formula. The next category is on the fact equivalence validations. So say for example, if two concepts are tagged by different taxonomy concept, say for instance, you have a vehicle as a member, but in your property plant equipment, you do have a dimension as a vehicle as well. So the vehicle as a concept or the property plant as a concept and vehicle as a dimension, it will give you a same relationship. So conceptually, they should have the same value altogether and they should be equal. So all these fact equivalence validations has already been defined in IFRS taxonomy, which has been reused by ESMA in the ESEF taxonomy. The next is on the negative fact validations. So negative fact validation means like a reported value should not exceed 0, which means it should always be reported in a negative way. So this is a common thing that we have seen so far in all the filings that has been happened or all the annual reports, that all the expenses items are always denoted in a negative way. So for that, the logic has been defined that all those concepts should not exceed 0 or should not be reported in a positive way. So that is a logic that takes care of that. Then we have a percentage warnings. So wherever there are like percentage calculation, this validation will be taken care of that. The next is on the period adjusted access aggregations. So for example, this is the new validation that has been come up due to the enforcement of the new disclosure, which is the cumulative effect of cumulative effect at the date of initial application, and that's the need that it has been having an additional period adjusted access aggregation validation. So to calculate the opening balances plus adjustments due to the cumulative effect. Then we have also the logics for positive fact validations. I think everybody must have seen that there are like while the submission process, there are few warnings that gets triggered when the concept is like, it should be positive in number, it should not be below 0. So these all things has been already been defined in the IFRS taxonomy. That's why it is triggering as a warning at the regulatory level, at the submission level. Then we have some technical validation. Now this thing I would like to, emphasize more on, because most of the filings, we get these inconsistent duplicate facts that should not be reported. Now what is the condition that like these errors we get triggered in the filings? First, it is mainly because one concept should not have two different values. That is for sure. But it may be because of the reporting mistake while preparing the annual report that it has been skipped. But actually when you do a filing with the regulator using this taxonomy, it will get triggered as an error with an inconsistent duplicate. So inconsistent duplicate should always be resolved in your filings before the actual submission to the regulator. So that is one thing that I would like to highlight here. Please do make very, take a proper care and see there are no inconsistent duplicates reported in the annual report. Now the next category is on the ESEF taxonomy. What all ESEF taxonomy has different types of validation rules. So here the first is like context validation. Now this has been added recently, which means that whenever a company is reporting like a period end date or start date, it should follow a specific format in the iXBRL files. So the format should be YYYMMDD. So this is how the format of the date should be there in the iXBRL or XBRL files. The next category is on the mandatory markup. As everybody knows that there are 10 concepts which are required to be reported. But if a company is not reporting the name of reporting entity, it will get triggered as an error. But the rest 9 items are still as considered as warning. So all these mandatory markups are also need to be taken care and addressed accordingly. The third type of validation logic is on the fact and footnote validations. Now, most of the annual reports, they do have footnotes as well in the annual reports, which they want to represent or which they want to display because it is relating to their primary financial statements. So the thing that the ESMA has come up with is like all footnotes should be linked to at least one fact value within the report, and it should have a particular ARC element. Again, that's too technical. I won't be going into that technical, but it's just to make you aware that if there are any footnotes that you want to report in your ESEF files, this thing you need to address too. And the next thing is on the LEI validations, like legal entity identifier. So the legal entity identifier taxonomy has put out some schema or some validations that should be added in the filings. Like your LEI schema should be as per the standards of ISO ORG, which is defined here. So if it's not followed as per that standard, it will get triggered as an error. So what we need to understand is that these all formula logics should be taken care while preparing your ESEF documents. Now the next thing is like, after seeing all the changes that are there in the IFRS as well as the ESEF taxonomy, what are the steps that the issuers or the preparers should take into consideration? What impact that they have on their filing? So here are the few points that I thought it is relevant to talk about. Is that whenever a preparer is receiving any kind of a latest taxonomy, they first need to change whether there are any IFRS concepts already available in the taxonomy instead of the extension that they have created. If that is the case, then they can very well use the new concept instead of creating an extension. So that is the one thing. Then if there is any change in the taxonomy due to the modeling structure, so they also need to look into the modeling that they have created for the previous reporting, and if they need to change the modeling of the taxonomy, they should do that in the respective subsequent years. Now also there is one thing is that there are some changes due to the references, because whenever the IFRS standard IFRS taxonomy is updated, there are changes in the meaning of the concepts. The concepts may look similar, but the meaning that they are showing, it may differ a bit. So wherever there are changes in the reference, that is also very important to look at and see whether it really comprises the meaning that you want to report. If the meaning is not that suffice, then please do try and use another concept instead of using the previous period concept. So that was also one thing. The latest thing that issuers or the preparer should know is on the ESEF 2021 taxonomy includes a new language as Irish for the reporting purpose. So any company who wants to follow the Irish taxonomy, they can very well go ahead and use this taxonomy. So few things that the preparer should understand while preparing their 2021 filing and going ahead. The next thing is on the when we can use the 2021 taxonomy. That's important. So as it is released by ESMA on the 10th of December, but it is not yet updated or it's not yet into force because of the ESEF regulation. So once we have an update and the regulation is up to date and within force, which we expect to be there in March 2022, then the end company can use 2021 taxonomy for their reporting purpose. But till then, they need to follow the 2020 taxonomy only. Say for the live example, say for the company has to comply with the requirement of 2021 by or before March 2022, they need to comply with 2020 taxonomy only. If any company has a filing after March 2022, say like in April, May, June, July, August, they can very well go ahead and use the 2021 taxonomy for the reporting purpose. But again, it depends upon when the regulation is coming into force. So until then, the issuers should also take into consideration the taxonomy files that has been used and what all changes are there in the conformance suit, right? Starting from the 1st Jan 2021. once the ESEF regulation is into force, the software firms, should integrate the ESEF taxonomy with the latest standards, the rules, the validation rules released by ESMA, and should integrate in the software tools so that their software are well enough updated and takes care of the latest standards and rules. So here are the few reference materials that you can very well use it for your reference, where you can browse and see the ESEF taxonomy files. You can also look for the ESEF conformance suit and test cases that has been released, and also the versioning of the document. So this versioning document gives you a brief insight of what has happened in the changes from the 2020 taxonomy to 2021. So this useful information, you can really use it for your further process and keep us updated. And I think I'm just done with my webinar. If you have any questions, you can take it now. Thank you.